Namaste everyone. Hope you are doing well. Today we will have wave optics class in PPT form, right? I want to show you some animations regarding whatever we have discussed in the previous video classrooms, right? In classrooms video, we were writing on the board and trying to understand the three-dimensional waves and Huygens secondary waves. But today we will have some three-dimensional videos and animations regarding that, so that our idea, whatever we have in our mind, will become strong, and it will have a purified image, right? It will have a correct idea inside the brain. Okay, so we will have some amount of recalling from the previous classes in terms of PPT, and then some few new things. I don't want to hurry up with all these waves and phase and superposition, path difference, phase difference. I don't want to put it very fast, because of course the number of questions asked will be very less, because you will be asked what do you mean by phase, what type of wavefront is emitted by a point, so such questions. But understanding it is very, very important for the future derivations, future understanding. That's why we will spend some time with that. Okay, and whatever we have studied is, one is the first idea about light was given by Descartes, and he said that light is a stream of particles, and he didn't put any theory. But Newton, in later stage, he studied Descartes' ideas and he put it in a proper way, and he gave a theory called corpuscular theory. So according to corpuscular theory, different sized corpuscles have different colors, and a surface which reflects light gives a normal force of reaction on these corpuscles. That's why they move like this. So as soon as these corpuscles fall on the surface, there is a normal force like this, and the corpuscles travel in this direction. Suppose a football is moving like this, and if you kick the football in one direction, it changes the direction then in the same way. Whereas a refracting surface, say this is a glass slab, what happens? When corpuscles fall on the refracting surface, they are attracted by the surface normally. That's why they change the direction. But the only problem with corpuscular theory was, it says that when light travels from rarer to denser medium, it bends away from the normal and its speed increases, but which is very against the observed facts, which say that light's speed of light decreases when it enters into a denser medium, but it says that it bends away from the normal. The theory says that light bends away from the normal and its speed increases. That was a major drawback of the theory. And but Isaac Newton did many experiments in light, and he gave a very good foundation for the study of light in the future days. The major one is, when light passes through a prism, it shows all its different colors, and these different colors are the components of the white light. So that was his major contribution, and we know that. Then came Christian Huygens, and Christian Huygens and Isaac Newton had a war, and some people were saying that light is a stream of particles, and because of its high speed, light is traveling in straight line. But Christian Huygens said that light is a wave. So this war went on for a few years, but Christian Huygens' wave theory stood strong for the reason that it could explain reflection, refraction, interference, diffraction, so many concepts of light, so many phenomena of light that is seen in those days. And even to explain interference of light, Thomas Young's double slit experiment, wave theory was used. So when that practical observation was explained using wave theory became very strong. Okay, what did Christian Huygens say? So according to his theory, light is a primary source. Any source of primary source of light emits its own waves, and when those waves move in a particular direction, they will be in some points in the path of the light will be in phase, and these in phase points, when they are collected together, we get a wave front, and so on and so forth. And you know what is this? We will go deep into this. First of all, we will see what theory was given by which scientist, and then we will go to Huygens theory in detail. Now, Christian Huygens' theory of secondary waves. Whenever light falls on certain material, each point of the substance will act like source of secondary waves, and secondary waves are emitted from here, and then the wave moves forward. Okay. and according to him, a point source of light emits its own secondary waves, and they will be in the form of sphere, and every point on the surface of the sphere will act like a secondary source, and that emits its own waves further. We get concentric spheres like this. So this is how a part of the sphere is shown here. So secondary waves are traveling, are producing their own waves and moving forward. We are going to study it in detail. So that is the secondary wave concept. And a point source emits a spherical wavefront, and you know this. And a linear source, suppose imagine a tube light is kept inside this. The simple animation which shows light travels in all the directions like this, except along the length of the tube light. Tube light doesn't emit light in this and in this direction. So no light from these two sides, only light from the curved side of the tube light. So how will be the wavefront growing? It will be growing in the form of a cylinder, isn't it? So it grows in the form of a cylinder. That is a secondary wave concept. So a point source emits spherical wavefront, a linear source emits cylindrical wavefront. And whatever be the source, whether it's a point source or linear source, the wavefront will be almost plane as they grow larger and larger. Okay, and this is another one, we have discussed it in the previous class. When a plane wavefront falls on a lens, the waves which enter here has to travel more in glass, whereas here they have to travel less. So these waves move forward much more than these waves. So these waves lag behind. So those parallel rays or the plane wavefront, which we call, by the time it reaches here, it will be bent like this. Why? Because this part of the wavefront moves faster. It has to travel lesser in medium. This part of the wavefront has to travel more in the medium. So it lags behind. So the wavefront bends. It becomes spherical. Plane becomes spherical and gets focused at a point. A beautiful explanation given by Christian Huygens on the basis of secondary waves. Okay. And then came another scientist called James Clerk Maxwell, because according to Huygens theory, the explanation for the propagation of light in vacuum remained as it is, because Huygens said that there is a medium, ether, everywhere, and using ether, light travels. But unfortunately, that hypothetical assumption was disproved because there was no base for it. There is no medium called ether. So the explanation of propagation of light in vacuum was not given by Christian Huygens. So next came James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell said that light is an electromagnetic wave. It is a combination of electric and magnetic fields. And how are these electric and magnetic fields? They are varying electric and magnetic fields. They do not remain the same at a particular point. They keep on changing. How do they change? When the electric field becomes maximum at a point, the magnetic field also becomes maximum. But they are not directed in the same direction. If electric field is in one direction, magnetic field will be in perpendicular direction. But the light travels perpendicular to both. So electric and magnetic fields being mutually perpendicular to each other, and they are also perpendicular to the direction of propagation of light. So whenever the change occurs, we see that the crest is moving. Can you see the peak point moving forward and forward and forward? It is not the actual electric field and magnetic fields at a point moving forward. They are simply increasing and decreasing. But totally the electromagnetic wave is moving forward. So this is the type of idea given by Maxwell, and so his idea gave the clear explanation for the propagation of light in vacuum, because electric and magnetic fields do not require any media. They can exist even in vacuum, and when they vary in vacuum, light can travel even in vacuum. So that was the new concept given by James Clerk Maxwell, and he said that light is an electromagnetic wave, and he gave set of equations proving that light is an electromagnetic wave. But practically it was not proved by Maxwell. Practically it was proved by Heinrich Hertz. He in his lab was able to produce electromagnetic waves and detect it at another point, and that was a major invention. So you must know how to credit the two scientists. Maxwell proposed the theory. He proposed the theory, and Heinrich Hertz proved the electromagnetic wave theory. So who proposed electromagnetic wave theory? Maxwell. Who proved it? Who proved electromagnetic wave theory? That is Heinrich Hertz. So he was able to produce electromagnetic waves in his laboratory, and they were detected in the laboratory at another point. That's why we have so many radio waves, mobile signals, television signals, and so many signals generated at a point, transmitted through space, and received at another point. So because of this invention, we were able to have such a good communication nowadays. Okay. So that was the contribution of Maxwell, and later on Marconi was able to send these electromagnetic waves to a very far away distance, and he was able to communicate the 2 points with the radio. And Indian scientist J.C. Bose also was able to transmit high frequency radio waves and communicate with them. So all these contributions made the communication stronger and stronger in the world. So we were able to connect the 2 points on the earth within no time. Since electromagnetic waves can travel with a high speed between the 2 points, we were able to communicate. So the invention goes to, and the credit of all this goes to James Clerk Maxwell, who just for the first time assumed that light should be an electromagnetic wave, or guessed that light should be an electromagnetic wave, proposed the theory, mathematically proved it, and later on Henry Church and proved it using experiments. So theory was proved, and theoretically it was proposed by Maxwell, but practically it was proved by Henry Church. So then the contribution of Marconi and J.C. Bose made it very rich. Now we will go to the Huygens principle of secondary waves again. Now if you drop a stone to a pond, then water ripples will be produced. What do you mean by water ripples? Water ripples are the motion of the particles continuously with respect to time. If you consider one water molecule here, as the ripples are produced, this goes up and down. So it doesn't move from one place to another. So now if you consider a particle at a particular point, then you will find that at a particular point, from the source, from the point where you drop the stone, the ripples will be produced. This is the source of waves, water ripples, and this is the source of disturbance, and ripples move away from this point source of disturbance. All the particles at this particular distance will be vibrating identically. So that's why you get a ring shape. So from the point, the source of disturbance, at this particular distance, all the particles will be vibrating in phase. You can understand it, right? So in this ripple, all the particles will be vibrating in phase. When all the particles go down, and everywhere it goes down, and when all the particles go up, everywhere it goes up. So at a particular distance, you will get identical phased particles, molecules, and if you collect them together, if you collect all these particles which are in phase together, you will get a wavefront, and all the particles will be either in the crest or in the trough. If one is in the trough, for example, here all the particles are in the crest, from the point source or the source of disturbance till this point. If you draw a line or a circle, this is called the locus of all the points. So this locus is having a crest, this locus is having another crest. So from the source at a particular distance, all the particles will be in phase. So locus of all those points gives the wavefront. Of course, here water ripple is a two-dimensional wave, so it doesn't travel upward and downward. It travels only on the surface of water. So it gives a circular wavefront. It is not spherical. So water ripples produce circular wavefront since it travels only in a plane. So this is another wavefront, and this disturbance keeps on moving forward, and we get water ripple, right? So this is a secondary, this is one wavefront, and that disturbance makes the other molecules to disturb, and the wavefront continues. So when the particles at a particular point vibrate, since the other molecules of water are also attached to this set of molecules, they also continue to vibrate. So wavefront grows in a particular direction, and a normal drawn to any wavefront gives the direction of propagation of the wave. Here you have to draw a normal to this wavefront. So first this wavefront will be produced, the innermost one, and secondly the outer one will be produced because the disturbance grows. So if you want to know in what direction the waves travel, you have to draw a normal to the wavefront. So normal to the wavefront gives the direction of propagation of the wave, and you can call this as a ray. In the case of light, you can call this as a ray, the direction in which light travels, and this you can call it as wavefront. Okay. Now, if you analyze it in a much more way, it will be like this. Okay. In a water ripple, it is a circular wavefront. right? Because the water ripple doesn't move in and out of the water. It is only on the surface. Now, if you consider here a point source of light. Light is a three-dimensional wave. It travels in all the direction, not on a plane. It travels in a space. So it is a three-dimensional one. So if you put the circle in the 3 dimensions, you will get a spherical wavefront, right? So a point source of light gives a spherical wavefront. You can understand it clearly here. So this is the source of light. From the source of light, suppose you imagine that the waves are traveling in all the directions. This was what we were discussing in the classroom. The waves travel in all the direction. If one produces the second crest, the other one will also produce second crest, second crest, second crest. In the same time t, in a particular time t, all the endpoints will be crests. If in a particular time t, if one wave is ending in trough, all the waves will be ending in trough. Of course, this is electromagnetic wave crest and trough. Okay, so from the source of light, these waves will be traveling in all the directions. And if you collect all the crests and troughs, imagine that you can switch off the light at a particular instant, and when the second crest is produced, you switch it off. All the second crests will have been produced in all the directions. Now, if you collect all these points, you will get a spherical wavefront, right? So it produces a spherical wavefront. Suppose you end it at the second crest, you will get a spherical wavefront. If you allow the light to grow further, you will get another wavefront, right? The next wavefront. So the sphere keeps on growing, and as the sphere grows, as it becomes larger and larger, at a particular point you will find that the wavefront is almost plane. That is what you call plane wavefront. So as the spherical wavefront grows larger and larger, at one particular point you can find that the surface is almost plane because the sphere is so large. So when the source is at infinity, the wavefront becomes almost plane. And this is what Christian Huygens said. And at the time t, you can find out what is the shape of the wavefront. After certain time t, how can you draw the wavefront? What is the shape after time t? At a particular time, it may be spherical, it may be cylindrical. How does the wavefront grow? Now here comes the explanation of Huygens in terms of what you call secondary wavefront, wavelets. So he says each point of a wavefront is a source of secondary disturbance. Suppose you get a sphere or a cylinder. Each point on the surface of the cylinder or sphere is a source of secondary waves. It gives secondary waves. And if you draw a tangent to the surface of all these secondary spheres or secondary waves, then it gives the position of the new wavefront. So if you envelop all these secondary waves, you will get a new wavefront. So how do you draw this? So that can be drawn like this. For example, if this is the source of light and the wavefront is growing like this, and now each point on this wavefront will act like a point of secondary sources, and they emit their own wavefronts, right? And Huygens made a hypothetical assumption that no wavefront moves in the backward direction, only wavefront move in the positive direction. So the now wavefront grows. So each point on the primary wavefront is responsible for the production of secondary waves. So when this wavefront is produced, you get the envelope of all these secondary waves. You get the new wavefront which has moved forward, right? These are all the secondary waves generating from the surface of primary wavefront. And if you get the envelope of all these new secondary sources or waves, then you get the new wavefront. So from here you will get new wavefront. So you get the envelope of this. So that gives the new wavefront. You can see it here, right? This is the new wavefront, and which grows further. Now again, so after time t, again it is a sphere, right? It is a larger sphere. And if you draw a normal to the sphere, then it gives the propagation, direction of propagation of the wave or the direction of light, ray. You will get a ray. Now this is the wavefront. Okay. Now, so you have, and this doesn't grow in the backward direction. So after certain, at t time, this is the wavefront. After t time, this is the new wavefront. That's how we draw it. So this is a very good idea of secondary waves. Of course, here the explanation goes like this, but in the later stage, when you have explained diffraction and all, you can clearly understand what is diffraction in terms of secondary waves. Now, if these waves grow larger and larger, they become almost plane, and that's how we show it in a diagram. We draw it in a plane wavefront like a line, right? We draw it like a line because we are looking into the plane wavefront vertically in front of it. So if this is the secondary wave production, and if the envelope gives a new wave front, then we draw the plane wave. As it grows larger and larger, it becomes plane, and if you turn the plane in front of your eyes, you get a line. That is what we draw in our book, because single line, parallel lines like this means plane wave front. But in terms of rays, it is parallel rays. It is not plane rays. Rays parallel, wavefront plane. Okay. Now we will. So that is the idea of Huygens. So that is the explanation for Huygens wave. And here you will get some questions like, what are the assumptions made by Huygens in the wave in terms of secondary waves? Each point on the source of a primary wavefront acts like a second source of secondary wave. It gives its own wavefront, and the envelope of the new wavefront gives the position of the new wavefront, and the normal to the wavefront gives the direction in which the light travels, or it is the direction of ray. Point source emits a spherical wavefront. So all these are small questions. Now we will see phase of a wave. What do you mean by phase? Suppose you look into a tuning fork vibrating like this. As soon as the tuning fork vibrates, as soon as it vibrates, the air molecules here will not be vibrating. You see, they are still here. When this starts vibrating, the nearest air molecules will be disturbed. As they are disturbed, they will move forward and backward, and they keep on propagating the disturbance to the other molecules also. So that's why we get compression and rarefaction. Sound travels in the form of compressions and rarefactions, not in the form of crests and troughs, right? So the region where the air molecules are crowded and denser and pressure is more is called compression. The region where air molecules are far away and very less in density is less, pressure is less, that region is called rarefaction. At every point, the compression and rarefaction is not permanent. You see, I will keep the cursor at a particular point. Do you see the compression at that place permanent? No, because air molecules once come closer, another time they move away, again come closer, again they move away. So the propagation of disturbance is possible. That means wave can travel only when every particle keeps on changing its criteria. That is what you call changing the phase. Every particle will not be in the same phase. It will be keeping on changing its conditions, and it will be compressing once, and all the molecules will be going away. So one region of compression now may not be the region of compression every time also. It will be changing, as if even in electromagnetic wave. At one point, I will show that electromagnetic wave again. If I go back, even in the electromagnetic wave, you see, a point where the electric field is very strong may not be the strong itself. So I will keep the cursor here. When I keep the cursor here, you see, now the electric field is larger. Next time it will be negative larger. Again going up, coming down. So it will not be permanent. Even if you observe this point here, see, once the electric field will be large, it will be negative, it will be zero, it will be positive maximum. So it keeps on changing. Only when you have a change like this, you can have a wave. So here also, you can see this. Yes. So when the particles vibrate, when they produce compression, when they produce rarefaction, we get a wave. And okay, we will move on to the transverse wave. You see, this is a picturization of transverse wave. When you drop a stone to a pond, this particle starts vibrating, but it is closely attached to the other molecules also. So it carries the other one, but this is the one which completes the first oscillation. Hope you will get a clear idea of what I have explained in the previous class. In the class, we were explaining using chalk and board, that's all. And here you can see how they actually, the molecules vibrate. Here, the role of spring and all the things will be done for the water molecules by their own cohesive force between the different water molecules. You need not connect separate spring for the different water molecules. There is a cohesive force between them, so that keeps the molecules intact, and that is responsible for the transfer of vibration. So here you see, this completes one oscillation, and as it completes one oscillation, one by one particle will start vibrating, and no particle will be completely at crest always, no particle will be completely at trough always. Every particle will get its own chance of going to crest and trough, but not together. All the particles don't go to the crest, don't go to the trough, don't go to the mean position together. When one is at crest, another will be just going to another position. But if you observe two particles here, you see, now if I can show you this one, usually we write in a book, we draw a waveform graph like this, and we call this as crest and this as trough. You see, when this is at crest, this is at trough, they have a phase difference of pi. You know, this is pi by 2 and this is 3 pi by 2, 1.5 pi, right? This is 1.5 pi, this is half pi, this is full pi, this is double pi. And this is lambda by 4, this is lambda by 2, 3 lambda by 2, sorry, lambda by 2, 3 lambda by 4, and this is lambda. This is 0.75 lambda, this is full lambda, this is half lambda, this is 1 by 4th lambda, 0.25 lambda. And now this, when this is at crest, this is at trough, they are completely opposite. They have a phase difference of pi, because this will be pi by 2, this will be 0.75 pi, right? 3 pi by 2, sorry, 3 by 4 pi, 3 by 4th of pi, this one phase. And this is half pi, 0.5 pi and 0.75 pi, right? Sorry, no, sorry, this is 0.5 pi, this is 1.5 pi, sorry. This is 0.5 pi, this is 1.5 pi. What is the difference between them? 1 pi. So these two have the phase difference of 1 pi. 1 pi means is always opposite. Two pendulums are vibrating in the opposite direction. 1 pi, 180 degree. Your hands when you walk, 180 degree. So they are all having a phase difference of 180 degree. So when this particle starts this journey downwards, this goes up. The same is the condition for this particle and this particle. When this comes down, this will be going up. Can you see such particles here? Two particles which are vibrating in opposite phase. Yes, one is this one and another is this one. You see, when this is at crest, this is at trough. When this goes to crest, this comes to trough. So now it is like a just born baby and okay, just born baby here, just started vibration, already born baby, because this is already started vibration. This was a baby born in between this and this has been born. So you just see the phases. This has completed, say we will start it from here. We will start it from here. Let it come here. When this molecule comes here, now we will start it. Yes, when it comes here, we'll start it. This completes first oscillation like this, and it comes up and it comes down. Now this vibration will be copied by this one little bit later. This will also vibrate in the similar phase. Now if you ask this particle and the last one, if you ask these two particles, then this will say, sir, it is my 9th oscillation. What about this one, 10th oscillation? Because this has started one vibration earlier itself. When this completes one oscillation, this will start. This will be lagging behind this molecule always by one oscillation. What about this one? Half oscillation lagging behind. So this and this have a phase, same phase in the sense a difference of 2 pi, one full oscillation difference. But now they look identical. But if this is the 9th oscillation, this will be 10th oscillation. But now presently they are looking identical in phase, right? So 360 degree means the same phase. 0 degree means same phase. But what about this and this? The third one and the first one, exactly opposite, correct? When this comes to the trough, this goes to the crest. When this comes to trough, this goes to the crest. So these two, first one and third one, they have a phase difference of 180 degrees, pi. What about this one? And do you have any other particle which have a phase difference of 180 degree? Here and here, you see, I said that. This one and this one, this one and this one, they have a phase difference of 180 degree. This and this, you see, this one, second one and fourth one, quite opposite. They have a phase difference of 180 degree. That means when this completes half rotation, this will start. So when this goes to the crest, this is at trough. When this comes to trough, this goes to the crest. So they have 180 degree. What about this and this? Third one and the last one, fourth one, fifth one, third and fifth, they are also 180 degree, right? What about neighboring molecules? This one and this one. When this is at 0, this is at 0. Okay, this is at 0, this is at maximum. When this is at maximum, this is at 0. That is 90 degree phase difference. Sin 90 and cos theta and sin theta, they have a phase difference of 90 degrees. You have seen that yesterday in the previous class. So when this is at maximum, this is at 0. This is -1, this is 0. This is -1, this is 0. See, neighboring molecules are always neighboring in the sense at a distance of lambda by 4. They have a phase difference of pi by pi by 2, 90 degrees. They have a phase difference of 90 degrees. Okay, try to understand this, how the molecules are. So exactly opposite phase, this and this, first and third. third and fifth exactly opposite phase, second and fourth exactly opposite phase. When one is at maximum, another is at minimum. And remember, any two particle will be vibrating with some phase depending on its distance. Depending on the distance between the two particles, we have a phase. You know that this is complete lambda, right? When you have two particles vibrating in phase, nearest to two particles vibrating in phase, we call it as a lambda, correct? Huh? When it is lambda, two particles at a distance of lambda have a phase difference of 2 pi. You know it, right? Two particles vibrating at a distance of lambda have a phase difference of 2 pi. Two particles at a distance of lambda by 2, two particles at a distance of lambda by 2 have a phase difference of pi. Two particles at a distance of lambda have a phase difference of 2 pi, 360 degree. Two particles at a distance of lambda by 2 have a phase difference of pi. Two particles at a distance of lambda by 4, 1 by 4th of lambda, must have a phase difference of pi by 2. That is always fixed. That need not be from the origin itself, anywhere. So these two particles are separated by a distance of lambda by 4. This is lambda by 2. This is lambda. In a distance lambda vibrating identically, but they will have a difference of one oscillation at least. They have a difference of one oscillation. So their phase difference is 2 pi, path difference is lambda. What do you mean by path difference? The distance at which these two particles are situated. Here I can define that path difference like that. Distance at which the two particles are situated. So lambda distance, 2 pi phase difference. Lambda by 2 distance, pi phase difference, right? The full lambda, 2 pi. Half lambda, pi. Lambda by 4, 1 by 4th phase difference, it is pi by 2. That is phase difference. Path difference, lambda by 4. Phase difference, pi by 2. That's how we can define. Sir, do you have an equation? Of course, these are the exact particles. Don't you have particles between these two? When the water molecules vibrate like this, don't you have molecules in between? There are plenty of molecules within these two, and there will also be vibrating. So, sir, we are discussing about only phase difference of 2 pi, pi by 2, only that much. What about the other phase differences like 60 degree, 45 degree, 30 degree and all? There are phase differences in that range also. And there is a distance between two particles which have a path difference of, phase difference of 60, pi by 3. So how to get it, sir? What is the distance between two particles which are having a phase difference of exactly 60, 40, 80, 90, 100? Do you have any formula? Definitely. This is the exact one. This you can remember. A distance of lambda, a phase difference of 2 pi. A distance of lambda by 2, a phase difference of pi. That means they are vibrating in opposite phase. If distance of lambda by 4, a phase difference of pi by 2, 90 degree, right? This and this. 90 degree phase difference, lambda by 4 distance. Lambda by 2 distance from here to here, right? From middle to here, lambda by 2, phase difference of pi. Lambda, 2 pi. Now, what is the relation? Phase difference equal to 2 pi by lambda into path difference. Very important equation. Actually, this equation, you have studied this equation in the last year itself. Phase difference is equal to 2 pi by lambda into path difference. One of the important equation, right? Now, sir, can you apply this anywhere? Yes. For example, I want to find out what is the phase difference between the two particles which are separated by a distance of lambda. If this particle and this particle are separated by a distance of lambda, what is the phase difference between them? Yes, we put it. Phase difference phi is equal to 2 pi by lambda into path difference. What is the distance between them? Path difference. Okay, here it is discussed for lambda by 2. Yeah. Phase difference between two particles separated by a distance of lambda by 2 from here to here. So put path difference equal to lambda by 2. This one, 2 pi by lambda into lambda by 2. 2 cut, lambda cut. Is the answer pi? Is it right? Yes. So if you have a distance of lambda by 2, then the particles within that distance of lambda by 2 must have a phase difference of pi. That means they must be vibrating in opposite phase always, because when goes up, another will be definitely coming down. When one is at crest, another should be at trough. Okay, now take another one. What is the phase difference between two particles separated by a distance of lambda? 2 pi by lambda, that is in the formula, into path difference, lambda, lambda, lambda cut 2 pi. Do you get that? So this is a common formula. This is very important. This is a supportive formula. No question will be asked, what about the phase difference and path difference between two particles separated like this? And that will not be asked, but this is a supporting formula. You must know it. Okay, we'll move on. Now we will go to the superposition of waves, which is very, very important. Right? We will see how the two waves superpose. This we have understood a little bit last time. Now we will see it in the form of waves. Now here you have to understand it like this. Red colored wave is one wave, and this green colored wave is another wave. They were traveling together in a medium, and that green wave sometimes falls on the red wave with its crest and crest, sometimes on crest and trough. What will be the result? That is given by the blue wave, right? So simply to understand, red wave and green wave are traveling with respect to each other. When the crest, sometimes crest falls on trough, sometimes crest falls on crest of green and red waves. Blue is the resultant. Now how is the resultant drawn? You see, when the crest of red falls on the trough of green, you see there is no wave. When the crest of green falls on the crest of red, you see maximum wave. This is the resultant. And when the two waves superpose, you never see the two waves at all. You see either the you see the resultant wave. You neither see red wave, you nor see the green wave. You see the resultant wave itself. So when you are by the side of the seashore, when the sea waves come to you, and when they return back, if another wave comes and falls on that returning back wave, you know that you don't see the coming wave, you don't see the returning back wave, you see a new wave, right? When you apply 7 Newton and 3 Newton on an object in the opposite direction, you don't see 7 Newton, you don't see 3 Newton, you see the resultant 4 Newton effect. Its effect is seen. That is how it is shown. You see here, that is shown in all the points. You see, at some points the blue gets vanished because crest of green falls on the trough of red. But wherever the crest of green falls on the crest of red, you get maximum wave. Can you see that? So here it has vanished, and here it is maximum because crest is falling on crest, and at some places it is zero because crest is falling on trough. So simply to understand superposition, this animation is done. Even when two water ripples superpose, the same thing happens. We will see a video in which water ripple superposition has formed a new wave, and the new wave will be like this. Wherever crest falls on crest, we get maximum water ripple. Wherever crest falls on trough, we get no wave at all. The molecules don't vibrate at all. At some other positions where the crest exactly doesn't fall on crest, for example, in this position now, wave doesn't vanish completely, but it will not be as strong as when the crest falls on crest, right? When the crest falls on crest, we get a strong wave, for example, here now. But when crest doesn't exactly fall on trough, it is not zero. It decreases. When crest exactly falls on trough, it becomes zero. Okay, it is as if you are given two forces, for example, 5 Newton and 4 Newton and 3 Newton, two forces. You apply that 4 Newton and 3 Newton on a body. What is the resultant? That depends on the angle. If you put both the forces 4 Newton and 3 Newton in the same direction, you get 7 Newton answer, maximum. If you put them in the opposite direction, 4 minus 3, 1 Newton, minimum. What about at 90 degree? 90 degree, root of 4 square plus 3 square. You know the formula, root of a square plus b square plus 2ab cos theta. That formula can be applied, and the resultant is 5 Newton. So which is in between maximum 7 and minimum 1. 4 plus 3 is 7, 4 minus 3 is 1. And when they are at 90 degree, when the forces are at 90 degree, root of 4 square plus 3 square, that is 5, which is in between 7 and 1. So you may get maximum force, you may get minimum force, resultant, and you may get somewhere in between. When the angle is 60 degree, you get a different answer. Again, it will be between 7 and 1. So in the same way, when the waves superpose, if the crest exactly falls on trough, 0. If the crest exactly falls on crest, maximum. What about when crest doesn't fall on trough exactly or somewhere else? That is different phase. When the crest falls on crest, we say that the phase difference is 0 between the two waves because both are producing crest. When the crest falls on trough, we say that the phase difference is 180 because one wave is going up completely, another wave is coming down. That is exact 180 degree phase difference. So when the phase difference is 180, no wave. When the phase difference is 0, highest wave. What about in between? 60, 120, 70 degree, 45 degree. we get different sized waves, right? We get different answers, right? So you may have a highest wave, you may have a zero wave, you may have a little bit different sized amplitude wave and all. Okay, so this formula is very important when you study superposition. Intensity of a wave, for example, you are receiving sound from a source, say mic. How much sound you receive, that is called intensity. You don't receive all the sound produced by a speaker, because the sound travels in all the three directions, and it is enlarging like a sphere, and you are receiving only a part of the light, part of the sound. And what does you receive is called intensity. So how is the formula for intensity of sound, intensity of light, intensity of water ripple, any wave? Intensity of any wave is given by this formula. This formula doesn't appear in the syllabus, but this is very much needed. It is not given in the syllabus for the reason that it is already studied in the previous class. That's all. So what is the formula? Intensity of any wave traveling in a medium is 2 pi squared f squared a squared rho v. What are the terms? 2 pi common, that is a constant. F for frequency of the wave. A, amplitude of the wave, maximum displacement. Rho, density of the medium. V, speed of the wave, the speed with which it travels in that medium. For example, sound travels very fast in solids. If you keep your ears in the railway track and ask your friend to beat the railway track at the other end, you hear two sounds. Why? One which travels through the track reaches your ears first because it travels faster. One which travels through air takes longer time to travel your ears. So that will be heard later. So you will hear two sounds. Sound travels with highest speed in solids. So what is the velocity of that particular wave in that medium? That is V. So this formula is very important, but we need only a part of the formula. We don't want the full formula here. So intensity of any wave is equal to 2 pi squared f squared a squared rho v, where f is the frequency of the wave, amplitude of the wave is a, rho is the density of the medium through which it is traveling. In a more density medium, sound or any wave travels with more intensity. V is the speed of the wave. Okay. Now, intensity is directly proportional to square of the frequency. Suppose you have another wave which is having double the frequency, its intensity will be 4 times more. And if you have another wave of amplitude 2 times the another wave, then its intensity will be 4 times. Of course, if the speed is double, intensity gets double. If the density of the medium is double the other, then the intensity of the wave in that medium will be double, because here you don't have square. So if rho and v are double, then intensity gets doubled in each case. And if amplitude is double, intensity becomes 4 times. This is what is needed for us. Why, sir? Only this term is enough? Why? What about frequency rho v? Of course, they are needed. When you study superposition, amplitude, how does it control the intensity? That is the only factor which is needed. Intensity is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. That is the most important thing that we need. Why, sir? Because you know that when two waves superpose on each other, green and red, when the crest falls on trough, the amplitude of the wave is 0, 180-degree superposition. When the crest falls on crest, trough falls on trough, 0-degree phase difference, maximum wave is produced, amplitude will be maximum. When the crest falls not exactly on trough, somewhere else, amplitude will be less. That means intensity of the resultant wave keeps on changing because of the amplitude. Because of this amplitude, intensity keeps on changing. If it is a light wave, the intensity of the light changes. If it is a sound wave, intensity of the sound changes. So that controls the full intensity, amplitude controls. Now, if you keep on moving forward, of course, this we have studied, phase difference and path difference, just now we have studied. Now, if you move on, again, we will see how does interference occur. You keep that formula in mind, that is very important. That formula is very important. We will see a little bit more now. About 10 or 15 minutes, we will see a little bit more what we have studied. Now, suppose we have a wave which is traveling in the left side direction, say. This is having amplitude A. Take another wave, amplitude little bit more, B. This represents the amplitude. This is little bit stronger wave. Okay. Now, if they superpose like this, everywhere crest is falling on crest. Do you get this one? So what will be the resultant wave? Suppose a water ripple flows in, is formed in water like this, Another water ripple at the same time comes like this. You are putting a stick on water, inside water, and moving it up and down, say. It produces one ripple. Another, your friend comes and he also puts a stick at the same point and he starts vibrating it. It produces another stronger one. What will be the what will you see in that water now? Water surface. You will never see this wave. You will never see this wave also. You will see a resultant wave which is having an amplitude of A plus B. Resultant wave will have an amplitude of A plus B, and it will be a stronger wave. What is this construction called? What is this interference called? It is called constructive interference. Amplitudes add up. What is the phase difference between the superposing waves? 0. Crest falls on crest. It is a constructive interference. Amplitude is A plus B. Now see a situation where like this. Now let me keep the second wave little bit forward. One wave is traveling little bit after the first wave has started. Last time they were traveling together from the same point, right? From the same point they were traveling. There is no path difference. If you stand here and ask the two waves, how much distance you have traveled? Both the waves will say, we have traveled equal distance. What the smaller wave has traveled with amplitude A here, the upper wave, the amplitude, the wave with the amplitude B also has traveled the same distance. Now, when we reach here, one wave has traveled a little bit later, the other one has traveled earlier, the one with the amplitude A has traveled earlier, the one with the amplitude B has traveled a little bit later. By the time they meet here, you ask the waves, how much distance you have traveled? They say, sir, we have traveled different distances. How much different? Lambda by 2, this much. This wave has traveled lambda by 2 extra than this wave. So there is a path difference between the two waves. So this path difference has destroyed everything. Last time their crest and crest were falling together, but now their crest and crest are not falling together. Crest is falling on trough. So what happened now? The amplitudes, they destroy each other. If the amplitudes are same, if A and B are almost same, then the resultant amplitude is 0. Where is the resultant wave? Resultant wave, you don't find any wave at all here. So if the crest of one wave falls on the trough of another, path difference, because of lambda by 2 path difference, that means one wave has to travel lambda by 2 distance more, that destroys the wave, and the result is no wave at all, because they cancel each other. Because if this is a water ripple, one wave says you go up, another wave says you come down. What about this one? If the these amplitudes are same, result is 0. Now we will understand it like this. One wave is traveling like this, and let us see that both the waves are in the same place. This is constructive interference. Crest is falling on crest. There are two waves inside this. You can't see it now. I will move on and I will show you. No path difference now. Both are traveling together in the same distance. Crest is falling on crest. Constructive interference. Maximum resultant wave. Now I will move the other wave little bit forward. Now one wave travels lambda by 2 less than this one. If there is a path difference of lambda by 2, path difference means difference in the distance traveled. If the path difference is lambda by 2, then this results in destructive interference. Crest falls on trough. Now again I will move this wave little forward. I will move it forward. Yes. Now what is the path difference? Path difference is this wave is traveling lambda extra. Now again crest falls on crest. So if the path difference is lambda, again constructive, right? If this wave travels a distance more, how much more? Lambda more than this wave. Again the crest falls on crest, again constructive, you will get a maximum wave. And again I will move the other wave, again here, crest falls on top. So if this one wave travels extra, how much? 1.5 lambda. This is 1 lambda, this is 1.5 lambda. Again crest falls on trough, again destructive interference, right? That means if the two waves don't start from the same point, if they start from the same point, no problem, like this. If they start from the same point, we get constructive interference, maximum intensity, maximum amplitude. If there is a path difference of lambda by 2, then destructive. If there is a path difference of lambda, again constructive. If they have a difference of lambda, of course, the crest of one, this doesn't fall on the crest of this, but crest of this falls on the crest of another wave, whatever be the number of crest, no problem. Crest falls on crest, constructive, again destructive, right? So it keeps on changing like this. Now you say it is 2 lambda, 1 lambda, okay, 1 lambda, 1.5 lambda, this is 2 lambda, 1, 2 lambda. So if the path difference is 1 lambda, 2 lambda, 3 lambda, exact lambdas, one is this condition, see, this this condition, not this one, again this condition, again not this one, this one. So if the path difference is 1 lambda, 2 lambda, 3 lambda, 4 lambda, exact lambdas, then again crest of one wave meets the crest of another. It's a constructive interference. What do you mean by that? They superpose with crest and crest. That means both the waves ask the water molecule to either go up or come down. They don't say, one doesn't say go up, another says come down, then it's destructive. So if the path difference, how can you write it in general? 1 lambda, 2 lambda, 3 lambda, n lambda you can write. So when the waves are like this, say, when they're like this, they are starting from the same part. See, the difference between this diagram and the next diagram is, here I have taken the amplitudes different, that's all, A and B. I have taken different amplitudes. That's why I have written A plus B. If the amplitudes are same, you feel that they are overlapping, right? It's constructive. What is the path difference by the time they reach here? 0. Because both the waves travel equal. So A plus A, 2A is the amplitude. Now come to this diagram. Okay, right. No, not this one. Yeah, here. Come to this diagram. Both the waves have the equal amplitude and the resultant wave will be larger. I have not written the resultant wave. What is the path difference? 0. What is the result? Constructive interference. Maximum resultant wave will be highest in amplitude. Okay. What is the path difference? Lambda by 2. What is the result? Destructive interference. Resultant amplitude A minus A, 0. Yes. What is the path difference? One wave has traveled lambda extra, correct? Lambda extra. What is the result? Constructive again. Maximum amplitude A plus A. What is the path difference? 1.5 lambda. What is the result? Crest falls on trough. Resultant 0. What is the path difference? 2 lambda. Okay. What is the result? Constructive interference. So if the path difference is 1 lambda, 2 lambda, 3 lambda, 4 lambda, 0 lambda, where is 0 lambda? This one, when they are together, 0 lambda, then constructive interference. So shall I write it in terms of n lambda, right? I can write it in terms of n lambda. Yes, it is here. For constructive interference, the two waves either must start from the same point, have no path difference, or must start from 1 lambda difference or 2 lambda difference. Am I right? Then it is n lambda. N starting from 0. No path difference means both are traveling from the same point. 1 lambda means one is traveling 1 lambda later, another one 2 lambda later. So n equal. Now what is the phase difference if they start like this? Now you know phase difference equal to 2 pi by lambda into path difference. You can use that formula. Then path difference, if it is n lambda, if it is 1 lambda, 2 pi, 2 lambda, 4 pi, isn't it? One full wave has a phase path difference, phase difference of 2 pi. 2 n pi, you put n equal to 0, 0 phase difference. N equal to 1, n equal to 1, 2 pi, n equal to 2, 4 pi, n equal to 3, 6 pi, like that. So if the path difference is n lambda, then phase difference is 2n pi, then it is constructive interference. What is destructive interference? See, one wave has to travel lambda by 2 late. Here it has started here, lambda by 2 late or away. That means by the time they reach here, one wave says, I have traveled so much distance. This says lambda by 2 less. So if the path difference is lambda by 2, 1.5 lambda by 2, right? 1.5 lambda here, then the crest falls on trough and the resultant is amplitude is 0. So if the path difference is n plus half lambda, see, put n equal to 0, what you will get? Half lambda. This one, this difference. Put n equal to 1, n 1 gives 3 by 2, 1.5 lambda. So it should be crest falling on trough. Then the phase difference is 2n plus 1 pi. So you take this one and put it in that formula. phase difference equal to 2 pi by lambda into path difference. You will get this equation 2n plus 1 pi. I will do it in the next class. I have forgotten to do that part of the equation in this slide. I'll do it in the next class. In the beginning, I will explain and I will move on then. So if the path difference is n plus half lambda and phase difference is 2n plus 1 pi, where n equals 0, 1, 2, 3, then it is destructive interference. Hope you have followed a little, right? Don't worry if you have not completely followed it, because we have two problems coming in, entrance exam problems. Even though they are entrance exam problems, try to understand it. It becomes very clear what is interference, right? So this is the condition. For when you come to the next class, you be thorough with these conditions. Even though if you are not understood, right, see these equations, then we will make it very clear. So for the time being, we will end up with this conclusion, which says if there is no path difference between the two waves, if the two waves are traveling together, superposing on the same medium, two water ripples traveling together, superposing in the same medium, and if there is no path difference, then constructive. You will get resultant maximum wave. That is n equal to 0, 0 lambda. Okay. Then n equal to 1 lambda. Then n equal to 2 lambda. Correct? Constructive. All constructive. And n equal to 0 lambda. What is the phase difference? 0 pi. 0 phase difference, no phase difference. Now, what is this one? 2 pi phase difference, because here it is 2 pi. What is this one? This is 4 pi phase difference. So how do you put the phase difference then? 2n pi. Put n equal 0, 0. N equal 1, 2 pi. N equal 2, 4 pi. So 0, 2 pi, 4 pi. So if that is the phase difference, constructive. So you should put phase difference and path difference. Already we have seen the relation between phase difference and path difference here in this diagram, right? Every particle which is separated by a distance, separated by certain distance, should have a distance between them as well as the phase difference. So you know the formula, this one, okay? And what about destructive, right? Destructive is like this. If the no path difference, it is constructive. Lambda by 2, first destructive. Complete destructive. No wave exists finally. It is flat. Water won't vibrate at all, because one wave says go up, another wave says go down. Now this is path difference of lambda by 2. What is phase difference here? It is pi, right? What is the next one? Next one is this one. Again, yeah, this is 1.5 lambda, right? What about phase difference? 3 pi, odd pi. Next one is, of course, next one I have not shown here. Next one is 5 pi, right? So it is here. N equal 0, half lambda. N equal 1, 3 lambda by 2, 1.5 lambda. N equal 2, 5 lambda by 2, 2.5 lambda. Phase, odd pi's. N equal 0, 1 pi. N equal 1, 3 pi. N equal 2, 5 pi. So that is how it goes. So we will see the real application of this. Sir, you say that the two waves are superposing like this. Suppose if I drop stone to water, water in a pond, will the waves move like this in the same direction together, like two friends walk on the road? No, it will not be so. But in actual situation, we will get it in a different way. But for understanding, this is very much needed. Okay. So we will see that in the next class. For the time being, in this class, the gist of this class is phase difference, path difference, and these equations, right? What is the condition for constructive interference? And if you want to get a big wave, which is that resultant addition of the amplitudes, how should they superpose? And if the waves have to cancel, how should they superpose? That those conditions you must know it. So in the next class, and we will see the actual application of this. How does interference look like in the case of water ripples, in the case of sound, in the case of light? But light we are going to study, but I am dealing with everything. So if you ask me, sir, how many questions may be asked from this questions? Only 1 mark, 2 mark, that's all. We have not yet entered into 5 marks question. But if you want to understand 5 mark question, you must have all these small things in your brain. If you don't know what is a wave, if you don't know what is the phase difference, if you don't know how they superpose, you will never understand interference. So these things should be inside the brain. Just you don't study them as if you want it for writing in the exam. Not needed. All these equations are needed, but not everything where I have done. Just understand it, and later we will put it in a derivation. Then you will understand, this is the situation. Actually, practically, this is what do we see. Okay. So till then, take care. and keep observing this video. Thank you. We will meet in the next class.